we had to, figure out how to get through this very tough period where so many businesses were cutting costs and, doing layoffs and just freezing all expenses that they didn't see as a must have. And so it was a very tough period. And in many ways, it was also the best experience, because that's where all of the groundwork and all of the sort of foundation building that we had done up until that point of building a really strong culture, of building the kind of place where people could be creative and responsive to the uncertainties around us and trusted each other and felt passion and commitment in their work.
So good morning and welcome to another episode of Better Business, Better Life. Today, my guest is joining us from Pennsylvania, US, and I'm really excited. This lady is just amazing. She was the co-founder and for a long time the CEO of Life Labs Learning. She's an established author. She's a researcher, a writer, and educator. She's written for Psychology Today and HBR and a whole bunch of other places. But most importantly, she's also she's working with rescued animals, which just really makes my heart sing. So she's just an amazing, well-rounded person. Hey, Tania, lovely to have you on the show.
I'm so excited to be here. And as you said that, one of these rescued animals decided to make some noise. So I apologize in advance, but we're bringing you and your listeners into the thick of my life. So there may be some sounds from time to time.
I love it. And we do this all live and we deliberately don't cut it. And sometimes my dogs decide that they want to, come into the podcast studio or want to leave the podcast studio or bark at there's something or other. So it's all fine. So you've got 21 rescued animals, haven't you?
That's right. Yeah. We started off very gradually, and then we ended up moving. I'm from Ukraine originally, grew up in New York City, relatively recently moved to Pennsylvania, and for better or worse, got a lot of outdoor space, which we then promptly decided to start filling up with animals that needed homes. So we have a family of 5 pigs that lives outside, 9 goats. We've got 2 pigs that live indoors, dogs, a cat.
2 pigs that live indoors as well. Oh,
yeah.
How cool. I'm going to come visit one day. I've got to see this. This will be amazing. Yeah. Now, I know that, you just recently stepped away from being the co-CEO of the Life Labs Learning. But you took that business from being a 2-man band right up to 150 people. Would you like to share with us a little bit of that story and even where that idea came from as well? And from the beginning, if you like.
Oh my goodness. Yes, I will try. So the idea actually didn't come from me. It came from my co-founder, Leanne Renninger. She started a version of Life Labs before I joined that had workshops that were open to the public on what she thought of as kind of the skills that you don't get a chance to learn in school. So she was teaching about topics like, how do you make small talk really well? What are wisdom skills? Things like that. And she and I actually met because I had another company at the time called Surprise Industries, where my background is in psychology. So I had been doing research on surprise psychology and Surprise Industries. We both created these experiences where you show up and you don't know what you're going to be doing until you get there. And we would work with companies and think about surprise through the lens of organizational health. Where do you remove unpleasant surprises? Where you add positive surprises? And Leanne, who started Life Labs, she also was really passionate about surprise psychology, was looking to create a workshop on surprise. And so that's how she found me. We got together, we designed this workshop on surprise psychology, the strangest of topics, and started actually booking corporate clients. My background was more in working with companies. And so over time, we sort of blended our businesses together, and more the training, the advising piece of it picked up steam. So her expertise was in designing these learning experiences. My expertise was in the kind of B2B organizational development and working with, corporate clients side of it. So my job was to kind of grow the business into this B2B shape out of the B2C shape that it had before. So I wish I had like a nice, simple story, a linear path. It was a very strange, kind of windy road into becoming part of this organization. It was the 2 of us, year 1. And then 7 years later, when I was ready to step out of the CEO role, we were about 150 people. We, at that point, reached about 1,500 clients. When I joined, we were 3 clients. So it was quite the adventure.
Wow. And so you're still involved in that role, aren't you? So you're doing a lot of you're doing the chair of the board and things like that. What do you think were the things you've been most proud of throughout that journey? Because it's a huge journey, and there must have been some really great highs, but also some challenges along the way. What are you most proud of?
Sure. One of those challenges is called 2020. um,
Yes.
and actually, maybe the highs and lows in many ways go hand in hand. Like if I think about the toughest year we had for sure was 2020, as I'm sure many businesses did. We were at that point 70% of the so we do leadership development, manager training, and about 70% of our business was in person. And then the pandemic hit, and we had to switch everything very, very quickly to virtual workshops. We had to, figure out how to get through this very tough period where so many businesses were cutting costs and doing layoffs and just freezing all expenses that they didn't see as a must have.
Hmm. Yep.
And so it was a very tough period, and in many ways it was also the best experience, because that's where all of the groundwork and all of the sort of foundation building that we had done up until that point of building a really strong culture, of building the kind of place where people could be creative and responsive to the uncertainties around us and trusted each other and felt passion and commitment in their work. You just saw this incredible sort of rising up within the team of people going, well, okay, well, we can't do this thing anymore, so let's come up with this other business idea. And people just, job titles didn't matter, and how long people had been there didn't matter. People just really came together and were so agile and responsive and inspiring, frankly.
Yeah.
And those were the absolute best moments, is seeing that it really took on a life of its own. The culture, the people co-created it and really
Mhm.
made it into this flourishing entity, that I couldn't even wrap my hands around anymore, because they turned it into what it was. And seeing that evolution was incredibly inspiring.
Oh, that's wonderful. And you obviously, in the middle of all of this, growing a business and going for this, you wrote a book as well. And the book, I've just lost the title. Oh, the Leader Lab. That's right, the Leader Lab. So tell us, where that came from and why you wanted to do that.
Yeah, so it's called the Leader Lab: Core Skills to Become a Great Manager Faster. And it's really a synthesis of our most popular courses. So
Mm.
we saw again and again the biggest impact we could make within organizations that were limited in time and money. Is focusing on really accelerating the effectiveness of managers. And so, of course, we do that through our workshops where we're focusing on skill building, but we wanted to make a book accessible as well, both to our clients, but also to people who don't have access to our training, or whether they
Mm.
can't afford it or they're not quite ready for it. We just wanted to kind of democratize access to these skills and tools, because we see the incredible difference that it makes very quickly, and to the point of your the whole theme of your podcast, both in work and in life.
Yeah. Absolutely. So the key, I remember when I looked at your website, the thing that really struck me was, instructions for human kindness is actually the first thing I saw when I landed on your website. And of course, the whole Leader Lab is all about, being empathetic, compassionate leaders in order to improve business. Tell me a little bit about, what are the common issues or challenges you see in the businesses that you work with in the leadership or management teams?
Yeah. Well, so for some context, the companies we work with organizations all around the world of various sizes. But the thing that they tend to have in common is there's a lot of uncertainty, both positive and negative. Either they're growing very quickly or things are changing around them very quickly. And what we notice is incredibly often the challenge is just the managers who are kind of chucked into these roles don't quite know how to do the job well. They want to, the intentions are there, but
Yeah.
there isn't clarity around what does this role look like when it's done really well.
Yeah.
And so the biggest and kind of in many ways simplest challenge we wanted to address is, how do we give managers, how do we simplify the complexity of it? How do we give them the tools, the vocabulary, the habits to be able to be multipliers? Because that's the point of a manager. Oftentimes we forget that you're not meant to be like, a controller, which is, a synonym for manager. Ideally, you're not just overseeing people and telling them what to do. You are having this 1+1=3 effect where
Yes.
the work that you're doing with others accelerates and amplifies their effectiveness. So number one thing we wanted to do is just figure out, all right, how do we take people who are feeling overwhelmed, who either have not enough experience or not enough experience managing in this kind of environment, and give them those tools that are going to set them up for success. And we both Leanne and I have a background in psychology. And so we started off by doing research on what are the specific skills that distinguish great managers. And then we broke those skills down into what we call behavioral units. So what are the tiny actions, kind of micro actions that result in, strong performance, commitment, engagement, passion. And that's what the book is. And that's what the training that we do as well.
Fantastic. So I think I've seen this with some of the people's businesses that I work with. People often get promoted because they've been there for a long time, or because they're just the natural person, or with a lot of family businesses, might be a family member who comes in and takes on a role. Or it can just be that somebody has actually started a business quite early on, shown some potential, and they want to take them up to a management level. But it's very, very different, sort of, doing things versus managing and leading people, isn't it? And I think that's what you're saying, is that people, get thrown into this, but they haven't been given the skills to actually be the most effective leader and manager.
And oftentimes there's no correlation between, actually, I would say usually there's no correlation between being really good at doing your job as an individual contributor. I don't know, maybe I'm doing sales or engineering, and then supporting others in achieving results. It's actually an entirely different skill set. I mean, they really, there's very little parallel between them. And so partially one of the challenges is sometimes individuals who don't even want to be doing the job of a manager end up being in the job of a manager. And then even if they do want to be doing it, it's not even like absolutely they need the skills, but before that, they don't even know what the job description is. So even just starting off with saying at our organization, what is the purpose of a manager? What does it look like when it's done well? What are some of the results that you're looking to achieve? And truly, if you do that well, we'd still love to work with you, but you won't need us nearly as much because so much of the pain is just, well, what the heck is a manager? And also it's just, again, the world around us is changing so quickly. What success was for a manager 20 years ago, 10 years ago might be different than what success is and what expectations are today. So I think it's just a really important thing to not take for granted that expectation needs to be clear.
So how does an organisation know that they're perhaps not doing things as well as they could be? What are the signs that you might see that says, hey, the wheels are falling off?
Yeah, so I'll say what does it look like when the wheels are falling off, and then maybe what does it look like when the wheels are creaking?
Okay, that's good. Yep.
I'd love to hear from people when they're just starting to notice the creaks, not when the wheels are
already down the motorway.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the wheels falling off, we see things like people quitting. You see this, either they're literally quitting or they're kind of quitting in place where they've checked out. You see, really unproductive conflict. Healthy conflict can be a wonderful thing, but conflict that gets tied up in ego and defensiveness and, people feeling disrespected, things like that. Having a really hard time hiring. And so, your business is really constrained in its ability to achieve anything. And then oftentimes, this is somewhere between a wheel falling off and a creek, is the founders or the leaders just being incredibly overwhelmed and burnt out and underwater because they can't rely on their team. They can't achieve the results and the hopes and dreams that they have by being able to leverage the power of the group. They're just putting everything on their shoulders and feeling burnt out and feeling exhausted and feeling frustrated and irritated and things like that. The earlier signs are things like an over-reliance on managers, for example. That's one that people often don't pick up. Managers often feel great being problem solvers. You come to them with a question, they give you an answer, you walk away happy, they walk away happy. And that for us is actually a really important red flag, because ideally what happens when a manager has someone come to them with a problem is they don't give them an answer. They ask them questions and they help them figure out that solution on their own so that the person leaves not with an answer, but with a skill set, an improved skill set in finding that answer on their own.
It's that whole teach the man to fish rather than fish for him,
right?
Yeah,
exactly. And oftentimes it's not even about direct mentorship. It's just being kind of a someone who's there to help them even work through what is the problem. It's like, what am I actually thinking? And so it's that, other red flags or creaky wheels or things like avoiding difficult conversations. Another one might be everyone feeling that they're constantly overwhelmed and busy. Really big red flag is we can't get to those things because there are too many things that are high urgency, high importance. So things slipping through the cracks, or people getting all the things done and then just being incredibly exhausted and burnt out.
Yeah, okay. I'm just making a few notes of those. That's really interesting. Yeah. So I'm sure that a few people are listening here now are saying, oh, yes, we've got a few of those things going on. I know I've certainly seen it not only in my own businesses when I've employed sort of staff and whatnot, but also in business that I work with. And I think that the busyness,
Mm.
we've got too many things, like you said, that are too urgent or too important. We just haven't got time to do anything else, is a real red flag in terms of, okay, this is not good.
And
Yeah.
it's a tricky flag too, because while you're in the midst of the busyness, you can feel really productive. You can feel
Mm.
frustrated, you can feel anxious, but you can feel really productive and really good about yourself, especially if you
Yep.
cross those 100 things off your to-do
Tick, tick,
list.
tick. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So in many ways, it's a problem that everyone feels. Really, I mean, even we hear it from founders, from executives. I don't have time. I have too much on my plate. But you're the one putting it on your plate.
Yep.
And time, uh, ideally, isn't something. Very much like management, I'm coming to believe more and more that people shouldn't manage people. They should sort of, work in partnership with people. And I'm thinking the
Mm.
same way about time. You shouldn't try to manage time and control time as though it's your enemy. You should really be kind of befriending time and collaborating with the time that you have. But everywhere we look, there's this kind of adversarial relationship people have with time. They're like,
Right.
I want more of it. And things aren't going the way I want. And so there's this chronic sense of strain and stress and urgency. Um, and again, it's fascinating because in many ways we're putting ourselves in those situations because we're the ones putting those things on our to-do lists. Even the
Mhm.
individuals with most power in the organization feel that amount of strain, and if you imagine the individuals who have less and less and less power throughout the organization, they feel it even more.
Yeah. So what's the first step to kind of tackling some of these things? So let's just say you're sitting here and you're going, you recognise it and going, yes, we've definitely got those issues in our organisation. What would you suggest is the first step towards making a difference?
Yeah, so when it comes to the issue of over reliance, when
Mm.
people are constantly coming to you, whether you're a manager or an executive within your organization, the thing that we found in our research was actually what I was kind of getting or hinting at earlier is, um, managers who stand out as most effective have a much, much higher question to answer ratio than managers who are seen as average, in terms of ratings from their direct reports. And so, literally, one of the things we found in our research is we would see a conversation, one on one conversation between a manager and their direct report. And managers who are, again, seen as most effective, they're asking about 10 questions in a 15-minute interval. On average, you're seeing about 2 questions per 15-minute interval. And we did this across several different countries. It varies somewhat, but really the ratio piece is still there. So, as strange as it sounds, the first step is really actually starting to take more off of your own shoulders and place the responsibility or the power of problem solving, of thinking things through, of figuring things out onto other individuals. And it's
So,
actually, oh, sorry, go
yeah.
ahead.
No, go ahead, Chef. Sorry, go.
Well, I was going to say, what that does is it essentially it it takes the power of problem solving and it takes it out of this like small bunched up cluster of the small number of people who can figure things out on their own, both in terms of skill and confidence, and it
Hmm.
spreads it. It like sets it free across the entire organization, which means that in kind of an indirect way, but very quickly, workload becomes distributed as well as
Yeah.
decision making becomes distributed. So now I not only have less to do, but I also have less to decide, and I
Yes.
have the power to make high quality decisions about what's most important.
I think we kind of use the terminology of accountability in our EOS world, where we actually sort of say, "Hey, look, actually, that's your accountability according to our accountability chart," and so you actually encourage the person to try to find the answers themselves
Love that.
by asking questions and things, by helping them, by supporting them, rather than
Yeah.
trying to do it for them. But it's really tough because
Mhm.
I have to confess I'm a wee bit of a control freak. I'm half German, so I like things to be done properly, and so often, yeah, there's this tendency to kind of go, but it's just so much quicker to do it myself than to try and
Yeah.
help somebody else. So how would
Well,
you
and one of the ways, yeah, I was gonna anticipating your question. I mean, there's a few different ways to go about it. One is to, try to change. The other is don't try to change and just collaborate with your inner control freak and go, yeah, actually, if I do want control, if I do want really good results, then actually it behooves me to think about what do I have to do to actually allow that to happen, not just
Mm.
today, but over the long haul, and not just
Yeah.
with a team of 2 people, but with a team of 200 people, 300 people. You truly can't achieve excellent results by holding on too tightly. That's the great paradox of it all. So
Yep.
it's actually asking yourself, what is, if I truly am the kind of person who wants to make sure that the results are excellent, then what is the scalable way to get there? You can
Mm.
be a solopreneur, you can do all the things on your own. As soon as you want to be able to leverage, the effectiveness or the power that happens when you get a group together, that's where control starts to happen by giving up control in many ways.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, we actually teach our clients, about letting go of the vine and just allowing other
Mhm.
people to step up. And it's about having systems and processes and measurables and having to be able to have those conversations with people. But can we try and use an example? So let's just say an employee comes over and I'm the manager, and they say to me, "Oh, look, I'm struggling with this. Can you tell me what to do?" How
Yeah.
would you then put that back onto them? What's the sort of the techniques you might use?
Yeah, I love that question. Well, the first thing I would consider is, do they actually have the information to solve it on their own? If
Hmm.
sometimes I'll use the example of, like, if I come to your office and I don't work there and I say, where's the bathroom? It doesn't help me for you to go, where do you think the bathroom is? Okay, that's
I
not a
love
great
that. Okay.
coaching opportunity. However, if someone is coming to me and asking about their project work that they're really close to, that is a wonderful coaching moment. So I'm
Mm.
going to kind of split it out just really quickly into two. One is the internal work we have to do as leaders. Again, my co-founder Leanne, one of the things that she used to study was something that's going to sound unrelated, but I promise it is. So she used to study taxi drivers in New York City, and
Okay.
and trying to figure out, why is it the taxi drivers honk even if it doesn't make a difference. I don't know if you've ever, I bet New Zealand does not have this
No,
problem.
we don't. And I'm thinking, I've not been to New York, but I have lived in London, so I can probably
Okay, yeah.
understand a little bit of, or also India.
Yes.
Yeah.
Imagine any of those places where there's just this constant barrage of honking. And sometimes you use it to warn someone, but usually you're doing it out of frustration. And so they
Mm.
tried all these interventions to try to reduce honking. And what they found was the most effective way to get taxi drivers to stop honking is to label what they call the honk urge. So the moment they felt the urge to honk, they would just go, okay, I want to honk. And that would pause them just long enough not to do it. And so going back to managers, number one, if someone's coming to me with a problem, the first thing I have to do is label that honk urge within myself to solve the problem for them.
Hmm.
That
Yep.
instant, if you think about it from a neuropsychology perspective, I'm going to get that dopamine burst of,
Ooh,
success,
I got
quick
to help.
win. Yeah,
Yeah.
like boom, I solved it for you. I feel like a hero. It's great. So I have to just label it. Whatever word you use, works. For me, I
Hmm.
go coaching moment inside my own head. Sometimes I
Yep.
say it out loud. So that's number one, is like reducing that urge to problem solve. So then
Yep.
number two, once you start actually working with the individual, I would say, even before you think about, well, how do I ask really thoughtful, probing questions? It's just, what we find is getting people to talk out loud through their own problem
Hmm.
allows them to actually understand the problem better and solve the problem faster. There's this concept in neuropsychology called spreading activation, which is essentially what happens when you start talking through something out loud, and more parts of your brain essentially go online and get activated.
Mm.
And just talking out loud, this works for extroverts and introverts. Even if you're listening, you're like, I hate talking out loud, I need to talk things through. It works in writing as well. But talking out loud works for introverts and extroverts. So the first thing I would do is say, tell me more about, tell me more about the problem. Walk me through it. I would do what we call playbacks and split tracks. So playback is just, our version of essentially like a repeat back. I like the word
Mm.
playback because you imagine yourself sort of winding back the tape and go, okay, so I think I heard you say this. Did I get that right? A split track is what we call teasing apart if there are different tracks to what the individual is saying.
Mm.
So often they'll say something like, oh, I have this project and I'm really stressing out. I'm not sure how to start it. And the deadline doesn't even seem realistic. And so I don't even know if I should be working on it now or later, blah, blah, blah. So I might pause and go, okay, it sounds like I heard two things. One is sounds like you're not quite sure where to start. And the other is, it sounds like you're questioning the deadline. Which of those should we talk about first? So number one, get the person talking, then get them to a place where they've heard themselves through that playback. Make sure you've kind of teased apart the different strands of that problem so it's clear which problem you're solving. And then the other tip that I'll throw out there is we use a coaching framework. There are many out there. The one that I really like is the one we made up, and it's called the Soon Funnel.
The what,
I wonder
sorry?
why I like it. It's called the Soon Funnel, as in
Soon funnel.
you'll get to the solution soon. And it stands for success, obstacles, options, next steps. So in that situation, I might say something like, well, what would success look like for this project? And that's a really important place to start because it is incredibly easy for us, especially when we're stressed, to just focus on the problem. And that can really get you into tactics mode versus what's the objective? What's the strategy? So what does success look like? Whatever they tell me, I go, okay, so what's standing in the way? What are the obstacles? What's holding you up? And then we go to options, we brainstorm, we generate ideas, and then finally next steps. So, okay, we've just talked through all the options you have. Which of those are most, viable? What do you want to do next? And so throughout this entire conversation, all I'm doing is sort of amplifying the effectiveness of their mind and their problem solving. At no point do I actually have to tell them what to do. And ultimately, they get to a solution quicker and they walk away with better problem solving skills.
I absolutely love it. Soon. Okay, the Soon funnel. I'm going to start using that. So I'm going to go back a little step because I heard you say that, this talking out loud works for both extroverts and introverts. And my understanding of extroversion versus introversion, certainly according to Myers-Briggs, is not about whether you're the light and soul of the party, but it's about how you actually tend to solve issues. And so I'm an extrovert in terms of I tend to talk things out in order to get to the solution. My husband is an absolute introvert, and so everything is kind of processed in his head first before anything comes out. So how do the introverts cope with this talking out loud? Because to me it seems counterintuitive.
Yeah. So, and I guess I'm not as familiar with Myers-Briggs, but kind of the aspects I'm familiar with are verbal processing versus internal processing. So the idea here is, ideally, you're getting a person to a place where they can verbalize what's going on. It doesn't mean that that's the first step. So the first step could be you ask a question, you go, take your time. If you want to write it out, or I'll ask you a question now, let's talk about it tomorrow. Or, or ideally I ask you and I say, how can I be most helpful? Do you want to talk through it right now? Do you want me to, share with you some ways that I could recommend thinking about it, and then we'll pick up the conversation tomorrow. Ideally, you're kind of calibrating with the person so that they can let you know what's the most helpful way to work together. So the goal is not to force someone into talking out loud right there on the spot. It might be that they just need anything from 30 seconds to just think about it before they answer, to maybe they want to sleep on it and come back and continue the conversation if the situation allows for that kind of time
frame. Yeah. Okay. So what you're saying is you're not saying, right, we are going to talk about it, we're going to talk about it right now, but it's more about actually setting the expectations or the boundaries around what works for them. And you talked about writing things down. I know that certainly, especially with difficult conversations, I find that actually writing things down beforehand just to get some clarity around what you're wanting to talk about as well. Okay, cool. So use the Soon funnel, look at what the success looks like, explore all the obstacles, come up with some options, and then the next steps. Loving it.
Yep.
Okay, brilliant. Hey, so that's a great sort of first step. What other things can we pick your brains on while we've got you on the show? What are the other kind of common mistakes you see and that could, you could offer a little bit of advice around?
Yeah. So maybe I'll go on to feedback next, since that is such a pain point, especially when you're working cross-culturally and in remote and hybrid, meaning some people are in person, some people are virtual situations. That is a real pain point. Without feedback skills, without feedback comfort, you just see learning just crawl. It's so difficult to be able to be responsive and agile without being able to very quickly go, this thing that you did, here's the impact that it's having. And then either great, it's positive and I do more of that, or whoops, there's an issue there and we have to calibrate and course correct. So it is I can't stress enough the value of it to be able to be this agile, high performing environment. Not to mention to be able to it's hard collaborating. And if we can't talk about what works for us, what doesn't work for us, then we're kind of feeling stuck together and miserable, but we don't know how to fix it. So feedback skills to the rescue. So to your point about writing things down, one of the things that we teach people is a really simple framework for writing out your feedback that you want to deliver, and then delivering it ideally live. Some feedback I think could be delivered in writing. There is research that shows though that we tend to perceive written communication as more negative than live communication. I don't know if you've ever gotten an email where you're like,
Email, yeah.
You're reading it and you're like, that person hates me, or this person is horrible.
Yeah.
And then you talk to them afterwards and they're like, no, that's not how I meant it. It was totally
No.
neutral. So we do
I think I'm
encourage
actually
writing
guilty
down.
of that because of being half German. I tend to kind of be very blunt on my emails. And sometimes people come back and they're like, what did I do to upset you? It's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, your email was so blunt. Oh, I'm just was busy. Sorry.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yes. I've seen early on in my career, I facilitated this kind of conflict resolution conversation between two branches of a company, one in the US and one in Latin America. And they had completely different cultural norms around greetings for their emails. So in the US, it would, and it depends on where in the US, obviously, but they would say things like, Debra, I'd like to check in on the status of that report. You said you were going to get it to me and you haven't yet. In Latin America, they would say, oh, Debra, how are you doing? Isn't the weather wonderful? And how have you been? And how's your family? Oh, by the way, there was that report I'm still waiting on. So it's a completely different approach to communication. And they, instead of seeing it as, it's a communication style thing, they were going, you don't respect me, or you don't see me, you don't value me, things like that. So
wow. Yeah.
Definitely what we recommend is, especially if the conversation can be sensitive, it is so valuable to have it live, virtually or in person. But write it down first. Actually, so many people miss that step. What they do with feedback conversations is generally they either avoid them or they avoid them and avoid them and avoid them until they just kind of blow up and they say things that aren't fully thought out. And, when we're saying things from a place of that kind of frustration, then of course the individual hearing it is going to hear it from, in a very defensive way. And so I'll just quickly share the model that we use to help people craft a better feedback message, if you'd like.
Yes, please. I'm all ears.
So we start off with what we call a micro yes. What we noticed, again, observing managers who were seen again and again, not just managers, actually, we looked at anyone in the workplace who had the best reputation for giving effective feedback. We monitored what was it that they were doing behaviorally, and we noticed this micro skill of starting with a micro yes. And so instead of just saying, hey, look, here's a thing you did, they would start with, hey, can I share some feedback with you about how that conversation went? Or, hey, I noticed something during that meeting that I'd love to, kind of debrief about. Would you be open to having a conversation about it? So that already makes the conversation so much more likely to be successful, because the person is, hopefully they take a moment to consider, is this a good time for it? Am I ready for this conversation? Do I want to hear this message? Once they say yes, they're also in a state of collaboration versus defensiveness. So there's the micro yes, which, by the way, should not be, can we talk? That is not a good micro yes for anyone on anything. So number one is that micro yes. Hey, can I share some feedback with you about how that meeting went? The next is the behavior. So what was it that you actually noticed? One of the things that we really try to focus on at Life Labs Learning and in the book, The Leader Lab, we talk a lot about the skill of de-blurring. So often our communication is very rich with blur words that could mean different things to different people. So a blurry piece of feedback might be something like, hey, I noticed that you weren't paying attention during that meeting. What does that mean, not paying attention? How do I know? And right away, even though it sounds kind of innocuous, most likely people are going to get at least somewhat defensive. And so blur word free behavior would be something like, hey, I noticed that during the meeting, you checked your phone a few times. Right. So that's the behavior.
So quite specific.
As ideally specific. And that probably resonates with the German aspect of your communication style. Yeah. I have a German coworker who will say things like, I was monitoring you during that meeting and you checked your phone 4 times.
Okay, that's not so good.
It doesn't have to be that specific, but ideally I know what you're talking about. And when he
but not ambiguous, so not something that could be misconstrued, which is the de-blurring thing.
Yeah, and ideally taking the judgment out of it, right? So not you weren't paying attention, but I noticed this thing. Then Step 3 is what's the impact? So you've got micro yes, behavior, and impact. Impact is, I mention it because I found myself getting really distracted. And you could even, you can even say, maybe that's on me, but I wanted to bring it up because I was hoping we can come up with a solution. Or maybe the impact is, I mention it because I noticed that then other people started taking out their phones, and I ended up having to repeat myself a few times because people missed the information that I shared. So it wasn't really efficient. So whatever that impact statement is. And then finally, ideally you end with a question. And so that could be something like, what are your thoughts? What do you think about that? Or, moving forward, or would you be up for experimenting with a different way of doing it? And the same goes for positive feedback. So it might be something like, hey, can I share some feedback with you about that presentation? I noticed that you went around and asked everyone their perspective. And I mentioned that because we got to hear from everyone in the room. And I think that really led us to have much better ideas at the end. How'd you do that?
Yeah.
What helped you remember to check in with everyone? That question at the end is so valuable because that's the piece that takes feedback from the past and moves you into the future and helps you both repeat and build on the things that are working well and tweak or change the things that aren't working well.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. So the micro yes, what's the behavior notice, what's the impact, and then a question to finish it off. I have to ask this question though, because what happens if they say no when you have the micro yes question?
Oh, it's my
What is
favorite
it?
part.
Yeah, okay.
I think that's wonderful because it means, so maybe I'll say, hey, can I give you some feedback on the last podcast episode? And and you go, oh, you know what? I have had the kind of day where I don't think I'm going to process it well. I can go, thank you for telling me that. When would be a good time for us to talk about it?
Right.
I would say throughout my whole career with the hundreds of micro yeses I've used, I've probably gotten, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 no's. In almost all of those cases, it was just about, okay, so when can we talk about it? I think in one case, there was someone who was like, I just don't want that feedback. And so it was my opportunity to go, well, how important is it? How significant is the impact? Like, is this going to harm me or harm others or harm the individual's career? Then I'm going to go, well, I do have to share it with you, but you let me know what's the best time to do it. What's the best place to do it? Otherwise, I can go, you know what? If you don't want it, that is okay, because that's going to save me some time.
Excellent.
Ideally,
and that's good. So it's about prioritizing for you, with what the impact of not giving that feedback would actually be.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Hey, I usually have this quite a bit more structure and say, can we have 3 top tips? We're kind of getting there. We've got the soon funnel. We've got the feedback thing. What's the third thing? Give me something else.
Okay. Okay. Well, so I'm so torn. Okay. I'll end with just one of my favorite tools from our work on helping people develop prioritization skills. This is a really, really small, easy one. It's something called the MIT method, most important thing. And it is as easy as starting your day by going, what is my MIT? What is that one thing that I want to get done today? And it sounds, kind of silly simple, but what we find is that when people don't ask that question, you either do the thing that is right in front of you because you're too tired to even think about it. Maybe you do the thing that's really easy because you want that dopamine hit, that quick win, the thing that someone who stresses you out asked you for. And so you have all of these decision criteria that are not actually linked to what is truly most important for your organization. And so it could be that you use this tool yourself and you go, what's my MIT today? You could use it on a team level. So with my team, we actually write it out in our one-on-one documents so that we have kind of clear alignment on what are our most important things. And oftentimes we'll actually write out, and here are the things that we will not do until the most important things are done. So what is your
I like that.
list? your do not do list. And you can also do it on an organization-wide level, which I think is incredibly powerful to be able to say, as a company, here is our MIT. Everything else is less important than this one thing. And going back to the conversation we were talking about with the wheels falling off and people quitting and deadlines being missed and burnout, so much of that stems from the lack of certainty and clarity around what is the most important thing. And so that tiny tool, it can work on a micro level or on a macro level.
It's really interesting because obviously with the work we do, we very much want to have a laser sharp focus on what the most important things are. And we said our 90-day rocks, and we're always saying, less is more.
Yeah.
And I know that as humans, we naturally sort of want to do more, but it's actually if everything's important, nothing is important.
Yes.
And I see companies who get, you can see the staff are working so hard and they are overwhelmed and they are completely stressed. It's because they're trying to do too much.
Yeah.
And if they could just prioritize with that one most important thing,
Yeah.
then I think it would make a huge difference.
And it
Yeah.
takes courage, it takes some courage to go,
Mm.
I'm not going to do everything. I'm really going to commit. It's almost like getting married, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a fear of commitment there. What if I do this most important thing and it ends up not being the most useful thing? So
Hmm.
but the research does support what you're saying. Organizations that have fewer priorities consistently outperform in terms of revenue growth organizations with a larger number of priorities. And I think that's because it allows you to focus and have depth and learn more quickly. So maybe you did choose the wrong thing, but at
Yeah.
least you go and run in that direction, and then you can learn quite quickly that you chose the wrong thing, and then that's okay. You can
They can
change it and
change.
do something else.
Yeah.
And otherwise you're just constantly suffering.
Mm. But the thing I actually also really like about your MIT is that also that anti-to-do list. So what are the things you're not going to do until it's done? Because I must admit, I am hugely easily distracted. And so even
Yeah.
if I've got my most important things, well, I might just do this and this and this first and then come back to it. But if I can actually go, okay, what am I not going to do until that's done? I think that would actually motivate me to get things done.
Yes.
So
Right.
great
That's
little tip.
almost
Thank
like
you.
you have to have your vegetables and then you get your dessert in some ways.
Yes, it is. Yeah. In an adult version. Yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic. So I'm assuming these kind of things are talked about in your book, or how do people find out more? Because I mean, the stuff we talked about today is just absolutely invaluable. But if they want to find out more about it, where would they go?
Yep. So if you want get it within the next 48 hours version, you can get our book. Again, it's called The
Yep.
Leader Lab, Core Skills to Become a Great Manager Faster. If you are interested in training for your organization, we do all of these workshops, live through both live workshops and digital kind of nudges and practice intensives and things like that. And so our website is lifelabslearning.com.
Wonderful. Hey, look, I have really, really enjoyed our conversation today. If
Likewise.
people wanted to get in contact with you personally, how do they get in contact with you? How do they? I mean, you can Google you, I think, and you can find you pretty easily. But
Right. Yep. I am Googleable, or you
yeah,
can go to my website, which is tanialuna.com, TANIA, Luna, LUNA.com.
that's fantastic. Hey, look, again, thank you so much for your
Thank
time. I really
you.
appreciate everything that you've shared. Congratulations on what you did with the Life Labs Learning as well. I mean, that is no mean feat to get, well, you and your co-founder, of course, to get to where you got to. So congratulations on that. I know that you're writing a new book, aren't you? So you want to tell
Yes.
us a little bit about that before we finish up?
Oh, sure. Well, yes, depending on when you listen to this, this will be either in the far future or the past. It is called Power With, and it comes out in September of 2023. And it is a book focused on how to distribute power well in the workplace. It is written in a very different format than my other two books. It is
Okay.
I'm calling it philosophical fiction. I think my editor is calling it a business parable,
Yeah.
but it's sort of like fictionalized story that I was really excited to try out as a format because there's so much research that shows that we learn better and remember things better through story than just
Yeah.
through the facts. So it's again Power With, and I'm
Coming out in
really excited
September.
to put it
Yeah.
out there. Yeah.
I have to say, Patrick Lencioni is one of my favourite kind of
Oh,
authors because he does exactly that. He does the business fable thing with meaning in behind it, and I just find them such an easy read. But also, as you said, it sticks in your mind more the message that he wants to get across.
that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
No, definitely. I mean, it's just one person, but I tell you, I love those kind of things. So I'm looking forward to it. Look forward to seeing that in September. Again, thanks for your time. Look forward to
Yeah.
following you with interest and hopefully catching up and seeing your goats and your cats and your dogs and all the things you've got in your rescue yard there.
I hope to visit your wonderful country where there are no snakes and no poisonous spiders. So
Yeah,
we'll
no, it's
have
the
to.
best country in the world.
Thank you.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Tania.